we didn't have Twitter and Instagram and every other social media they got. I think we had Facebook. Like, I'm not that old.
No, Facebook was 2009.
These ladies, and I'm a WNBA fan.
It's been a good season.
They cannot have this Caitlin Clark thing up any worse if they tried.
Caitlin Clark's success doesn't diminish what Sheryl Swoopes accomplished. Caitlin Clark's arrival doesn't diminish anything that they've done. I don't get this old guard. Sheryl, you just got, your facts are off.
It feels like it's just not true. It just feels like you're intentionally trying to minimize who she is.
Sheryl Swoopes, one of basketball's brightest stars, found herself at the center of a storm that left many fans shocked and scratching their heads. A legend in women's basketball, Swoopes had earned a reputation not just for her on-court prowess, but also for her leadership and influence off the court. However, the headlines recently screamed something unexpected. Sheryl Swoopes fired. The reason? A controversy swirling around another rising star, Caitlin Clark. But before we proceed further, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe. Now, when you think about Sheryl Swoopes, you think about someone who dominated the game. She wasn't just good, she was legendary. The first player to be signed by the WNBA, Swoopes was a trailblazer. If there was a Mount Rushmore of women's basketball, her face would be up there with the biggest names in the sport. So when the news broke that she had been let go due to remarks about Caitlin Clark, people were understandably stunned. How could someone with such a solid legacy suddenly find themselves on the wrong side of the story? Swoopes' downfall came after some comments that weren't taken lightly. In today's world of sports, where everything you say can go viral in minutes, the stakes are high. But nobody expected Swoopes, of all people, to step into such a mess. Caitlin Clark, the sharpshooting guard from Iowa, had taken the college basketball world by storm. Her deep three-pointers, court vision, and swagger had endeared her to fans, even drawing comparisons to NBA stars like Stephen Curry. She played with fire, and fans loved it. But apparently not everyone was thrilled. Sheryl Swoopes, during a candid interview, made some comments about Clark's style of play that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. While the exact words varied depending on who you asked, the message was clear. Swoopes wasn't a fan of how Clark carried herself on the court. Some interpreted it as a generational divide. Swoopes came from an era where fundamentals ruled and flash wasn't always appreciated. Clark, on the other hand, played with a flair that felt more like a modern NBA highlight reel. It's not hard to see how opinions would differ. Swoopes' comments might have flown under the radar if it hadn't been for the firestorm of reactions that followed. Fans were quick to pounce, labeling her out of touch, bitter, or simply unwilling to embrace the new wave of talent. Social media, that modern arena where battles are fought in 280 characters or less, turned into a battleground. The heat was on, and it didn't take long for the pressure to reach a boiling point. Swoopes was soon shown the door, with a vague statement about moving in a different direction. But everyone knew why it happened. The controversy had simply become too much for the powers that be. Caitlin Clark, for her part, didn't seem too bothered by the whole situation. Whether by design or sheer indifference, Clark stayed focused on her game, continuing to light up the scoreboard and drop jaws with her no-look passes. If the drama with Swoopes bothered her, she sure didn't show it. In interviews, she was all business, and it became clear that nothing was going to shake her confidence. Clark wasn't just a player, she was a phenomenon. While the drama between Swoopes and Clark played out in the media, another figure in basketball weighed in on the matter. Enter Charles Barkley. Now, if there's anyone who's never afraid to say exactly what's on his mind, it's Sir Charles. For years, Barkley has been the go-to guy for colorful commentary on TNT's Inside the NBA. He's had more than a few famous rants, but when Barkley talks, people listen. And when it came to Caitlin Clark, Barkley didn't hold back. During one of his many appearances on sports shows, Barkley made it clear that he wasn't interested in the drama surrounding Swoopes' comments. Instead, he focused on Clark herself, and his message was simple. Caitlin Clark was a baller, and anyone who couldn't see that needed to wake up. Barkley, a man known for his no-nonsense style, wasn't going to sugarcoat anything. He saw in Clark the same kind of intensity and talent that he had in his playing days. She didn't just play basketball, she attacked it, and Barkley, who'd been in his share of battles on the court, respected that. It was almost comical how easily Barkley dismissed the controversy. While everyone else was busy dissecting every word of Swoopes' interview, Barkley had already moved on to the next thing. To him, it was simple. Clark was a star, and there wasn't much else to say. His bluntness was refreshing, especially in a time when so many sports analysts seemed intent on overcomplicating the issue. Clark was good, and that's all that mattered. But even as Barkley tried to steer the conversation back to basketball, the fallout from the Swoopes incident lingered. There were debates about whether Swoopes was treated unfairly or whether she should have been more careful with her words. Some argued that she was simply offering a critique, something every sports figure does. After all, how many times had Barkley himself called out players for what he saw as shortcomings? And yet, Barkley remained in his spot on TNT, loved and hated in equal measure for his honesty. It was a strange situation. On one hand, Swoopes had a right to her opinion. She had earned that much after everything she'd accomplished in her career. But on the other hand, there was a sense that her comments weren't just about basketball. There was a deeper tension at play, one that hinted at the generational shift in sports culture. The old guard, represented by players like Swoopes, had been replaced by a new breed of athlete. And while there was mutual respect, there was also a sense of friction. Swoopes' comments about Clark might have been the spark, but the fire had been building for a while. In the days and weeks after the firing, the conversation around Swoopes and Clark continued. Some fans rushed to defend Swoopes, arguing that she had every right to speak her mind. Others sided with Clark, seeing her as the future of the game and dismissing Swoopes' remarks as sour grapes. But through it all, one thing remained clear. Caitlin Clark wasn't going anywhere. Her star was still rising, and if anything, the controversy had only made her more determined. As for Swoopes, her future remained uncertain. Would she find another role in basketball? It was hard to say. Her career had been defined by resilience, so it wouldn't be a surprise if she bounced back. But for the time being, she was on the sidelines, watching as the next generation of players took center stage. In the end, the story of Sheryl Swoopes and Caitlin Clark wasn't just about basketball. It was about change, about the clash of old and new, and about how sports are constantly evolving. Swoopes had once been the face of the game, and now it was Clark's turn. The baton had been passed, whether willingly or not. And while the two players might never see eye to eye, they were both part of the same story, one that would continue to unfold long after the headlines had faded. Charles Barkley, ever the voice of reason, or perhaps the voice of chaos, seemed to have the last word. Caitlin Clark can play, man, he said with that signature smirk of his, and if you don't like it, too bad. In typical Barkley fashion, he summed it up better than anyone else could. Basketball wasn't about drama or who said what. It was about what happened on the court. And for now, Caitlin Clark was writing her chapter, one three-pointer at a time. In the grand scheme of things, the drama would fade as it always does in sports. There would be new controversies, new stars, and new debates. But for that moment, the basketball world was focused on the two figures at the center of it all. Sheryl Swoopes, the legend who had once ruled the court, and Caitlin Clark, the young star who was blazing her own path. And somewhere in the middle of it all was Charles Barkley, sitting back, laughing, and calling it like he saw it. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more engaging content. We thrive on your feedback, so be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Until next time, keep discovering and stay tuned.